Hey guys, welcome to the Plug Into Your Life podcast. We have Andrew Wayfinder here. I'm not gonna botch up your last name.
Oh, it's simple. It's Hryniewicz. You just don't look at it because all that Polish spelling makes you scared.
Hryniewicz.
Rin, yeah, Hryniewicz.
Hryniewicz. Okay, there we go. I should have asked you that before starting. But yeah, guys, we have Andrew here, and Andrew is in a great space and helping people, and has had a very interesting journey. And I can't wait to dive into some of these topics. But Andrew, just knowing a little bit about you, it looks like you've had a journey from spiritual to corporate to all kinds of different avenues. And I'm very interested to hear how your journey started out and what your life was like prior to discovering some of the spiritual tools that you seem to have come across, and what happened from that. How
Yeah.
did you?
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, I'd like to start off by saying I'm probably the least likely person to be doing woo-woo stuff if you look at kind of the family I came out of and what I was expected to do with my life. I mean, I went to college many years ago uh, in Georgetown to the School of International Business. I was supposed to become a banker. And that lasted about 6 weeks into my first accounting course. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? And I wound up actually transferring to the college I really wanted to go to, but I'd been talked out of, which was General Liberal Arts and in St. John's in Annapolis. And I got to study a bit of everything and be the Renaissance man, which is really what I was interested in. But father was a World War II survivor, engineer, businessman. My mother was from Missouri, the Show Me state. No, no spirituality or weird stuff. Not even any religion in my background. So none of that sort of stuff. But over the years, I had three kind of awakening experiences where the veil dropped and I saw through, quote, normal life. And the first one was the year after I graduated. I got a grant to travel and study around Greece, reading Greek myths and wandering around the country in a kayak. And the idea was by trying to retrace the routes of the original Greek, sort of people who sailed around the Mediterranean while reading these stories, I might understand them. And one night, a couple of weeks when I first was there, I was just falling asleep one night, and I'm looking up at the Milky Way, and I'd never seen the Milky Way before because I'd grown up in cities, and here I was under this incredibly dark sky, and you could look up and just see how the Milky Way was like this river of light. It was just overwhelming, and all of a sudden, everything just flipped on me. The veil dropped. I'm not looking up. I'm looking down. I'm looking down into the universe, and I'm aware that I'm being held onto this planet by gravity, but if gravity let go, I would fall forever. And then a split second later, I've got like a God's eye view of this little dot of consciousness that's me on this pebble that has this little film of life on it. And the pebble is going through this immeasurably large space at these insane speeds. And then it hits me. I'm alone and I'm going to die. And that just kind of blew my mind. And that was really just, I think what I realized was that awakening experience was going through the filter of being a modern, rational, scientific person, which was you're alone and you're going to die. And that kicked off about, the next 20 years of meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, reading about mysticism, and just trying to figure out what that experience was about. And about 15 years later, it happened again. I was working with a meditation teacher in Baltimore, and she was explaining something one day in the kitchen about the nature of reality and the soul. And she was making lemonade. So she had a big pitcher in one hand and, the frozen concentrate in the other.
Yeah.
And she just dropped the concentrate into the pitcher and said, "This is your soul. This is your body."
Mm.
And they're not really connected. This is your essence. And suddenly, I don't know what happened, but just boom, again, the veil dropped. And I spent the next 3 days just being completely blissed out on being me. I was just, I can't even really put it into words. I was just grooving on being alive, on being whatever it was that I saw there. It wasn't a very useful state because I was kind of like a human balloon. I mean, I was just sort of bobbing along, and my teacher would sort of grab my hand and say, "Okay, now we're going shopping," sit in the front seat of the car. Because all I could do was just like, my tongue was hanging out, and I could. And then about 5 years later, I had a third experience where I was working with a spiritual healer after my mother died. I got really depressed and had to kind of like put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And just one day in her room, the veil drops again, and all of a sudden the room is full of angels.
Wow.
It's like, from the size of my thumb to as tall as the room, and every size and shape in between. And that's when I suddenly got it. It's, oh my God, it's not empty out there. It's more full than you can possibly imagine. And so I think those three experiences just kind of blew my awareness wide open to, we're not alone. That we're surrounded by sort of a concern, a power, a wisdom, an intelligence. And we're not just surrounded by it, we are it, and it's us. And then it just gets really interesting.
Yeah, I love all that. And so there's a lot to unpack in there, though. So I'm very curious. You said that you ended up in Greece and on a canoe trip through. How does even one go from okay, I'm gonna do these studies, and all of a sudden you realize that's not gonna happen. You have that experience, but was it just that event of the learning about the Greek mythology and stuff like that, or was it your curiosity? Like, where was your mindset around that integration into experiencing that veil dropping?
Um, I think the veil dropping that first time was almost like cosmic luck. I
Mm.
mean, I don't think I was preparing for it other than, um, I mean, I went to college in the like 1980 through 84. So I arrived in college with like the first generation of yuppies. Um, and I think I was idealistic enough that I wanted to go to college to learn stuff. I really wasn't that interested in, well, I need to figure out how I'm going to make money. And so I think that was the first sort of bit of discouragement, was being surrounded by all these, wannabe yuppies, and everybody was just focused on, how am I going to get a career that's going to make me as much money as possible? And there wasn't really any sort of intellectual curiosity, any desire to learn, which is why I wound up transferring to St. John's to sort of study everything. Um, but I wasn't interested in meditation or spirituality and any of those sorts of things. It was a very kind of Western intellectual tradition, rational discourse, debates. Uh, but it was definitely studying, the whole span from the ancient Greeks up through, 20th century science and mathematics and literature. So I think there was a kind of visceral understanding of the kind of intellectual journey the Western culture has been on. Um, but I think that moment in the olive grove where the veil dropped, I think that was just luck or happenstance or maybe, past life preparation kicking in. It wasn't something, I mean, I definitely wanted to go to Greece and have the adventure of, it was a very unusual foundation where you proposed a year-long project, and if the person interviewing liked it, you got $10,000 in a year to do it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I think it's important to bring up because like sometimes I'm around people that are very closed off to wanting to know more, and even if it's not the spiritual sense of, oh, I want to know about spirituality or meditation, I think just showing up in life in general with that awestruck like curiosity of just life in general, and wanting to know, well, okay, there's science, there's math, there's all this stuff, but let's go a little bit deeper. Let's like, I want to know a little bit more, a little bit more. And I feel like when people have that open-mindedness and that curiosity of life in general, I think that does open up the door to having different experiences.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I think unfortunately, I think we're, as children, we're born in a state of wonder, and school kind of beats it out of us.
yeah, it's true. Here's what you need to know. You don't need to know anything else. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Yeah, so then you get into the other three awakenings, and I also agree with that. I think that, I had my first big awakening. It was a really powerful one, but ever since then, it's like another one, another one, another one. It's like it, and every time I think like oh wow, I've really kind of come a long way. It's almost like the more you learn, you don't know. And then another realization for me was like, the more I think I'm alone, I am alone, but the more I know that I'm connected to everything, I am everything, and it's like this weird duality of you can have both experiences, and but where I'm placing my attention is what's happening, I had a near death experience I was explaining before we got on here. And basically my big thing was, we came into this life with a contract with these beings, these entities, these energetic, it's just a vibration of energy. And we basically they use the word contract, where they never leave us, they're always with us, but the only stipulation was that we have to call on them, and we have to trust that they're gonna show up, they're gonna be there, they're gonna do whatever it is. Asking you shall seek, or asking you shall find, I don't that's not the right words. It's
Yeah, yeah,
asking
I
you
know the one
shall
you're.
get. I don't know. But yeah. And so as I've grown in my awakenings, it's realizing that the more I let go of the outcomes and expectations of everything, the more I'm allowing the opportunity for the creative intelligence, is what I like to call it, to kind of wield and guide and move things the way I really truly desire inside. Is that your experience with that? I mean, did
Well,
you
it's
find
it's
yourself? Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of different ways of answering that question. I mean, one is, I'm a shamanic teacher and healer and a guide, so I teach people how to connect with spirit and work with spirit helpers. And one of the things I always tell people is that, connecting with spirit is like lassoing a whale. You once you've done it, you really can't let go, and you kind of have to go where it takes you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Um, so that would be, one thing to say. But I think the other thing is, in my own personal experience was, I went through this journey of those three moments, but also in all of that, I was, working in my first career as an architect and an ecological designer. Um, and then, as I mentioned, in midlife, my mother died of cancer, and I kind of got really depressed around that whole loss and trying to figure out, because there was some childhood trauma that I'd never quite dealt with, that I'd been tiptoeing past for years, and her death kind of, you know, made me realize I had to face some of that stuff and kind of put myself back together. And that's what actually led into, in midlife, becoming a psychotherapist. Um, And then couple of years later, there was still kind of stuff exploding in my life that didn't make sense. And I realized that there was something other than psychology going on. And that's what kind of triggered me into stumbling into shamanism and into actually a process known as destiny retrieval.
Hmm.
And it was in the process of doing the destiny retrieval that, as you said, I discovered this agreement, this soul level agreement that I had made 900 years ago in a previous lifetime that was still running my life. So it was the rejigging of that that kind of put me onto a whole new trajectory. And then what's come out of that experience of, through the shamanic work, through learning how to connect with spirit helpers and guides and power animals and ancestors and, the whole catastrophe, as it were. I have this dual experience. As a human being, I can walk through the world and I can feel lonely. I can feel scared. I can worry about where's the rent going to come from. A couple of years ago, my girlfriend died of cancer, and that was a huge loss. And so I have that experience of pain and suffering on the human level. But at the same time, there's this. I might have moments of being lonely, but I'm never alone. And that never alone experience makes all the difference. That the universe has my back and things are happening for me, not to me. It's quite remarkable. I mean, just yesterday, I was, there was a 3-day event I was scheduled to attend, virtual training kind of a thing. I was really looking forward to it, and about an hour and a half before it kicked off, got an email from the organizer saying, "I'm really, really sorry. I'm very sick. I won't be able to deliver the quality experience. We're going to have to reschedule." And it was actually kind of perfect because a whole bunch of things had cropped up in my life that, I could have done them later after these 3 days were over, but it's really much better now that the 3 days will get pushed off to a few weeks from now, and the stuff that needs to be done is going to get done. And I think it's learning to sort of accept that what might look like a disappointment or, it's like, this wasn't part of my plan or schedule. It's part of a bigger plan.
Yeah, I love all that, Andrew. And I would love to dive into like, the architect and then the psychotherapist stuff, but I'm more interested in the shamanic healer teacher guide. So, but I think people can relate to, okay, we got all this stuff going on in my life. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling alone. I'm secluding myself, going through some type of dark night of the soul. Now, I don't know about you, but in my experience with those experiences, they turned out to be the most beautiful moment in my life. And an example, I had some car things going on where I had like a race car basically, and I just got it back, and I was driving up north to Pennsylvania on a 4-hour thing the night before Thanksgiving to help someone, a friend of mine, go visit family for Thanksgiving. Well, an hour before we get there, or 30 minutes, the brand new transmission breaks again. And I had this moment where he gets out of the car, and I'm sitting there, and the initial reaction was anger and like frustration. And I hit the steering wheel, said a few cuss words, but then it shifted to where, okay, I can't change anything right now. And I don't know about you, but this is my question is, have you ever leaned in on other people in your life to offer you that different perspective that you're needing to get out of that experience? So like I reached out to someone, and they said, "Oh, that happened to me before when I was on a trip. My car broke down, but it actually ended up being the most beautiful. It was the best part of the trip." And I was like, oh, I can shift my awareness to have that perception of, well, this is bad, but I'm just going to allow everything to unfold and know that everything's happening perfectly the way it's supposed to. And sure enough, it ended up being the best night ever. I ended up meeting the family, and like it turned out to be a beautiful Thanksgiving. Like all my plans changed. And now those people that were in my life are like a good friend. I've gone to see them, and it's like this, and you never know the way things are going to unfold if you just submit to the unfolding of the experience. If I latch on to my expectation of, well, this should go this way or this way, or my father died, or whatever loss that I'm experiencing right now, I'll hold on to, okay, well, everything always has worked out in the past. And if I have a hard time understanding that perception, I'll latch on to other people in my life that may be able to pull me into a different viewpoint. Did you experience that? And is that how you ended up into the shamanic experience? Like, how did you even find out about that?
Well, I think the shamanic thing was more. I had a meditation teacher who said a number of very funny things over the years to me practically daily, and it took me a while to really get it. But one of the questions she would constantly ask me is, "How loud does it have to get?"
Mm.
As things were exploding around me or not working out. It's like, what are you not paying attention to? And the other thing that she always used to say is, you have to ride the horse in the direction it's going. And I, this was me often sitting backwards on the horse, complaining about the view.
Wow.
So I think it's learning to be, and I think in a funny sense that's the heart of compassion,
Mm.
is to be able to look at the world through the eyes of love and acceptance, not through the eyes of judgment or attack. And it's not easy. Um,
Well, they say too, well, I don't, anything I deem good or bad is just my idea of what's good or bad, because what's bad now, and I was just talking about this last night, what I am deeming as a bad situation now, in the viewpoint of someone else, that situation is actually really good. Like, oh, my life sucks. And I was like, really? I was like, let's talk about that, because right now there's someone else in the world that's walking 10 miles to go get fresh water, and he's like, oh, well, yeah, that would suck. I'm like, would it? Because there's someone else that doesn't have legs that can't walk to go get water,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you
It's
can
like,
do
oh,
the
well,
same.
that would suck. Well, would
Yeah,
it? Like it's just a
yeah.
different, yeah, viewpoint of the same thing. Yeah, very cool. All right, so shamanic healer, teacher, guide. I had my first experience with a shaman about 3 months ago, and I was in a ceremony, and it was so profound, and just and what I learned was that the shaman's energy of love, you could feel that in the space that he created. It was like a very safe space of
Mhm.
meditation and quietness and stillness. And through the process that I was led through, it was like I could feel the energy of this shaman, and it was like he was the boat captain, and inside the boat he was controlling it, as people were having these emotional highs and lows in the ceremony. And I was just so in awe over how he was able to control
Yeah.
that space.
Was it a plant ceremony or a
It was,
non-plant
yeah, it was a
ceremony?
ayahuasca ceremony. um but so but there's different levels of shamans, right?
Well,
I lost your video there. Let me see.
are we back?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Um, yeah. Well, how to describe shamanism? Uh, the way I mean, I did a lot of my training with Michael Harner, who is an American anthropologist who was studying shamanic cultures in the late 50s, early 60s. And he had a very powerful experience of what was going on there. And, in the way that Suzuki brought Zen to the West and Yogananda brought yoga to the West, Michael brought shamanism to the West. I mean, it was a dying tradition in the world at that point. That the older generation were still doing it, but the younger generations were being sort of seduced away in many respects into modernity. And in other places like, in the Soviet Union, shamanism was outlawed, and if you were caught with a drum, you could be executed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was some pretty fierce stuff. But anyway, long story short, he started kind of researching both shamanism as a kind of phenomena in the anthropological literature and also in the field. And he basically identified that, it's a form of culture that has been everywhere on Earth. And if you go back into our ancestry, we all come from shamanic cultures. We all come from cultures that experience the world as being alive and full of life and intelligence and spirit. And then in those cultures, there were methods for connecting and working with those spirits. So the plant medicines like ayahuasca, San Pedro, etc., mushrooms, that's one tradition. Another very typical, one of the most common tools is the drum or the rattle. That there you can do stuff with sound that does things to your brain. And so both the sound or the plant medicines awaken a potential in our body to have these altered states of consciousness and travel to other dimensions of reality. And then in those other dimensions of reality, you get power, you get information, you get guidance, you get healing. And then you bring it back into your quote, normal, quote, real life.
Yeah, it was just a one comment on that, because I think the word shaman has a lot of emotion or attachment to ideas that people may have had by just hearing the word
Yeah.
throughout culture, right? So I'm just very interested to kind of open that up a little bit. It was funny. I was in this ceremony and the shaman, I mean, I could talk hours on just that ceremony, but
Ayahuasca is an amazing experience.
yeah, well, he came over and started doing the rattle. It's like this sound instrument, and all of a sudden my body like moves into this like yoga pose, and I don't even do yoga. I've never done it, and then learning about that experience, that the yoga even isn't even about the poses. It's about moving energy, and your body goes into these poses, and it was my first experience with like just my body taking over and just like
Yeah,
opening up and shifting
the
energy.
pose is doing you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was really intense. Very, very much healing. So I would love to talk more about shaman. Like if someone hears that word, what are like maybe 3 points that you would make about that, and what a shaman can do in someone's life?
Yeah, well, I mean, Michael had a very, very simple definition of what a shaman is. He says, that when you strip away all the cultural titles and the different forms of ceremony and what have you, he says it's fairly quite simple. The shaman is someone who travels to other dimensions of reality and accomplishes miracles. And by miracles, he just means they get results that we cannot explain by our current understanding of how the world works.
Yeah.
Um, and the way I sort of describe it is that, using the plant substances or the drumming techniques or exhaustion or movement, a whole range of cultures have discovered that by using these tools, we unlock a potential that, as far as I can see, everybody has. I ran a meetup here in London for about 3 years and, had several hundred people go through introductory evening talks and trainings. And in that time, I came across, maybe three people who couldn't use their imagination, couldn't focus their imagination enough to start the journey process, the kind of visualization, meditation process. So I think it's like riding a bicycle. We all have the potential, if we want to take the training, and go practice to ride the bicycle, to go into these other dimensions. And then, very much like riding a bicycle, we can all ride the bicycle, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be able to do the Tour de France, that there are innate abilities or aptitudes that come into play, so that some people, journey very easily and go very deeply, whereas for other people it's more effort and they don't go as far. But I think that basic potential is there for everybody, and it's our birthright. It's who we are.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been my experience. I mean, even in my out of body experience when I had in the hospital, it was just showing me like everything you want is just waiting for you. You just it's just about taking those little baby steps in the direction, and cultivating that habit or that muscle of whatever you're trying to grow. um yeah, even meditation for me, like this channel anyways. I really wanted to start it because the process I had to go through from, okay, I've trained my mind and body to be this way over 38 years or whatever I'm at now, and in order to be here, I don't like this anymore. It's my judgment, but I see this and I want to be like this. So to get to here, I've got to overcome these habits and routines, because my body is simply just a survival machine that wants to create habits and routines so it can survive on autopilot. It's like learning how to drive a car, right? In the beginning stage, I was hyper aware, stressing, sweating. I don't like it. And then after a few days, a couple of weeks, all of a sudden my body goes into autopilot. And now I can think about something else. I can look out the window. I don't have to pay attention anymore. And for me to change how I'm doing my life, it was this uncomfortable process of forcing my body and my mind to sit still long enough for me to take back control over what I wanted it to do. And you know, I really love that there's people like you and others that have kind of walked this walk, and they say, now here, follow me, and it's sometimes it can be just so much, it saves so much time and effort when you just kind of follow behind someone else that's already kind of walked this path. And I think that's why like the work that you do is so important. I just want to dive into, so you brought up, you work as a executive career coach for corporate cinderellas, high achievers who get the work done, but often in the background, while others take credit due to trauma, history, something like that, but helping them reconnect to their soul's purpose, passion, and power. I mean, that is like a very powerful statement that you do, but I can see how your experiences from, your different levels of career and work and spiritual awakening, you now have like this broad spectrum of awareness over guiding people through this process. And it's just very magical and powerful. Can you share like a little bit about that? So what do people expect, and how do you end up using all those different tools and modalities to help people through that?
Um, wow, yeah, that's a big question. Um, well, as the quote executive career coach, um, I I have evolved into working with a lot of executive and professional women, mostly in corporate, which
Oh, we lost power there for a second, but go ahead, Andrew. So
yeah, yeah. So I mean, uh, a bunch of years ago, I was, I had a psychotherapy practice over here, and I was really interested in the shamanism, and I was running the shamanism meetup here in London, where I would have, kind of an evening thing once a week, teaching people the basics. Then I was doing like an advanced circle, and
This for people wanting to be a shaman or just
no, just people in, sort of, they were sort of like spirit curious.
Mm.
So they were just learning how to, work with their spirit helpers, get answers, do various things. And then I would do kind of half day, 1 day, 2 and 3 day retreat like cycles around recovering your destiny, soul contracts, healing past lives, those sorts of things. So that was just people who were interested more in like spirituality sorts of things. But within that, I started working with a lot of executive and professional and corporate women, which was initially kind of weird. It's like, why are they coming to me? Because I'm none of the above.
Yeah.
But they were people who were kind of in crisis, mostly professional, but sometimes personal. And they were looking around for help. They tried therapy, they tried this, they tried that, and they were just looking anywhere for help. And they were like stumbling across me and finding in the work I was doing very profound solutions. And what I realized over time was that, that was that sort of corporate Cinderella pattern I was describing, where these were often very, very accomplished women, super high achievers, trapped in bully situations, glass ceiling, sort of just misogyny and sexism often, and also as well as racism, and environments where they were really getting, taken advantage of, manipulated, people stealing credit, really horrendous stuff.
Yeah.
But what I realized was that, and this is not about blaming them at all, this has nothing to do with blame, but they had a trauma history which made them vulnerable to these psychopaths around them. That psychopaths and bullies are like sexual predators. They know instinctively who they can get away with doing this sort of stuff to.
I just inject one thing. They did a study where they had a group of people and they put what I don't know if it was a rapist or some type of sexual predator, and then they put a victim of a sexual predator in the same room with, I think there was like over 100 people, and the people, those two didn't know each other or have anything to do with any of the experiment or anything, and they ended up finding each other and communicating together. And I just like that's so interesting how you
Yeah.
bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I said it was not, it was not a demographic I went looking for. It just at one point I looked up and realized, holy cow,
Hmm.
these are the people I'm working with. This is in a sense my expertise, which, and it makes sense because I mean I had a pretty profound trauma history of my own that I've, spent a lot of time and energy healing. And so that the sort of the coaching side of things is people just come to me, and there's about a 6 month process that I take them through of kind of unpacking the dimensions of the bullying, the glass ceiling, the not getting the advancement, whatever it is that's going on. And then sort of in the middle of that 6 month process, we do a day of something known as karmic alignment. And it's a sort of a day long, sometimes 2 day long kind of healing and rewiring of your four bodies, aligning your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and your spiritual body, lining them right up. And then we spend the sort of second half of that period kind of integrating the shifts and the changes. So that's like, that's when I'm wearing my executive coaching career hat. Um, and then the more shamanic side of things, I did the meetup for quite a few years. And then there was a period when literally from 1 week to the next, the meetup just stopped working. There was about 6 months where I was advertising my regular schedule of things, and nobody was responding. And I just sort of, I just kind of gave up. It's like, okay, I closed it down. Well, in retrospect, this is that balancing that pattern thing we were talking about earlier. That was about the time my girlfriend got her cancer diagnosis, and that kicked off 2.5 years of treatment and recovery. And so the universe was just saying, we're turning the volume down over here because it's about to get really loud over there. Um, and, sort of went through that journey. Unfortunately, um, you know, they thought they'd cured the cancer, and then about 2.5 years later, the tumor was back in a place where they'd done the radiation, so there was nothing that could be done. And Karina died in about 4 months, and it was so. Only recently, I'm getting nudged by my helpers to pick up the shamanism torch again. Now that the world has gotten used to doing things on Zoom, to offer the circles and the advanced groups and the retreats and things online. Because I've for the last 6 or 7 years I've been working with my clients only online because even when they're clients from London, it's it can take somebody an hour to get to my office. So there's really no point in them toing and froing when on Zoom I meet, they're there, spirit goes anywhere. They don't need to be in my room to connect with spirit. And in fact, what people often say is that I've had clients who, done stuff with me in this room, done stuff with me in person in groups, and also done stuff online, both in person and in groups. And they say not only is it equivalent, it's often better because when you're at home in your sort of safe space, spirit knows that you can just curl up and go to sleep when it's over. So they can go really deep. Whereas if you have to get up, and walk out the door and, get on a subway or drive a car, they won't take you as deep.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, I love that. And I've had the same experience too. I've been doing a lot of work on Zoom, and some of the downloads I've been getting is that this was such an important shift for humankind, to almost jump over the edge of online communication. I think it's one of the most powerful tools of this big awakening. I think that's happening.
Yeah. Well, and all the wasted travel time.
Yeah.
I was listening to sort of an industry voice recently here in London saying, the day of flying to Frankfurt from London for a meeting is over. We you don't need to do that anymore. I mean, if it's about going somewhere for 2 or 3 days to be in depth, yeah, travel makes sense at that point. But hopping over for an afternoon meeting and back, used to be normal, but it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. 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 So that's cool. So, all right. So if we have people listening, and I also see like a 70-30 shift from women to men in this spiritual space. Um, I think that shows a lot about the feminine energy. I think there's a natural lead, maybe an easier lead into for women to kind of be looking into this type of space for some to answer some of the problems that they're having or challenges in their life, whether that be work, family, any type of situation. Naturally, I think as we dive deeper into the problem, the only way out of the problem, like Einstein says, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created the problem. I think women tend to lean into, okay, let me look out of this problem into some other solutions that I'm not looking at. And it usually doesn't. Men tend to, in my opinion, harder work, more effort, but women, I feel like anyways, okay, well, I tried this more effort thing. let me see what else we have. And I think they're naturally inclined to kind of be drawn into a more spiritual answer for their life. So it would make sense, I feel like anyways, that you would naturally attract women in that stature because I feel like they're more inclined to be open to those type of answers. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's certainly true that, you know, if you know, being a guy in the personal development space, I'm often, you know, one of a small number of men in the room of any sort of an event. So I do think that, yeah, I think as a whole, women tend to be, um, I think when it comes to sort of the more emotional and foundational side of things, that's where you find women doing work. I think guys tend to orient themselves towards, let me go learn a technique or a skill. You know, let me get some sort of a tool in my hands. And that's now the shamanic world is kind of interesting because when I've gone to uh, you know, when I did my advanced healing training, for example, the gender balance was almost 50-50. So I thought that was quite unusual. But I think fairly characteristic of a lot of shamanic work is that it is a little bit more gender balanced. And I have to say that it's true. I mean, I probably get three-quarters of my clients are women. Um, However, when men do come through the door, they're very interesting characters. You know, they're not sort of bog standard people. So I think, you know, they're people who have that curiosity and that drive, and they want to connect to something bigger, and they want to do something bigger than you know, just sort of chase after the goodies.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful too what you're doing, and I just want to point out if you guys are trying to get a hold of Andrew, you can go to andrewwayfinder.com. We're going to put some links down below so you guys can reach out, check out more information about him. I would love to even have another show and just dive deep into shamanism, if that's a word. I think it is. um, yeah, so check out those links down below, guys, so you guys can check him out. Um, oh shoot, what was I gonna say? As far as business and corporate, and I had a really successful business, about 25 employees, and I was working 70 hours a week. I couldn't. It was like I had so many things going on, and I was struggling so much. But the aha moment for me was when I started diving into my emotional attachments to past things that happened. I started doing past life regressions. It was like you brought up these different things, but for me in the business world, it's interesting. I never really connected the dots to when I started doing that type of healing work with other people in my life and guides and teachers like yourself, and I released my bond to my old attachment to all those things. I mean, I even got healing in past generational curses, you know, of alcoholism and different
Oh
things like
yeah,
that.
it's amazing how that stuff.
Oh my gosh! And when that energy shifted inside of me, it was such a flood of just raw love, really, for my life was on the other side of that. And when that shift happened, it was so profound that I ended up all of a sudden, like I started attracting different people in my life. I get this business coach, and before I knew it, I was working 5 hours a week, making twice as much more money as I was when I was working harder for it. And it's just so cool that you brought up all those different types of
Yeah.
healings that you guide people through, because that shift for me was so important in my financial life. So it's really cool that you offer
Yeah.
that.
Well, and actually, that reminds me of one of my favorite clients. Is that about two-thirds of the people who come to me come because of, like, you know, the work crisis picture. You know, they need to get out of hell into, you know, what they really want to be doing or what's. But about a third are people who are super successful, who've hit major thresholds, and they're suddenly, it's like that scene in Jaws where they first see the shark and it's like, oh shit, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah.
You know, these people are going, oh wow,
Yeah.
I'm going to need I need to be a bigger person. And one of my favorite clients was Nicola, who came to me about 6 years ago. And, super accomplished, PhD in physics from Cambridge, a 15-year climb up through fellowships and things to head of a lab, head of a research team, university lecturer. Really arrived, but is kind of overwhelmed by all the opportunities and all the choices. She said, I've got 450% of what I can do on my plate, and I don't know what to cut. Tremendously excited. Couple of million in grant money to solve big problems. So a little bit of pressure there of, want to take my team in the right direction, want to go after the right questions, want to make an impact in my field. So there's all that going on. And then there's also this like mystical side of her is waking up. And the physicist is terrified that if the mystic gets discovered, she'll be laughed out of the profession and lose all credibility.
Yeah.
And the mystic is saying, we have to quit physics and become a yoga teacher. and she was really, being pulled apart by that. And again, we worked together for about 6 months in the destiny awakening process of recovering her destiny. And by the end of it, she had completely integrated being a mystic and being a scientist. She went off and did a 9-day ayahuasca retreat in Peru. And 3 months before she left, she was already meeting the ayahuasca spirits here in London. And so she was like super prepared and had this amazing experience. And, what she said is, after all that's done, she says it just completely opened her up to a whole different way of being in the world, of solving problems, of thinking things through. And she says, I'm just, the way she described it is, I'm getting more done with less effort.
Yeah.
In a way that feels, completely right and integrated with her being. So that's the other strand of work that is, my people come to me in pain with problems, and obviously the first goal is to solve the pain and the problems. But my real agenda is for them to leave connected with spirit, connected with power, connected with wisdom, because everything else follows from that.
Yeah, love that. I was just at a Donnie Epstein retreat. I don't know if you know who he is.
No.
Oh
Say
wow,
more.
yeah. You have to look him up. He does. He teaches chiropractic. He grew up seeing energy, and everyone thought he was crazy. Put him in a nut ward for a while. He ended up becoming a chiropractor, and he noticed that he could see these energy spots on people's bodies, and that when he applied attention and intention and pressure to these places, he could move the energy throughout the body. And he ended up training other chiropractors, and he calls it a network chiropractic.
I've done that years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, his, so anyways, experiencing that shift for me, doing some of his work, it was just like he took, I was like so bottled up with energy, like I was holding in here, and I'm like, it's kind of an emotional thing. And this this network care person took my hands and placed them outside of myself and put them in the air. And it was like all of a sudden this angst, this energy that was kind of stuck in here, it was just like and it was like this. It was just this moment of clarity where I realized that we are so infinitely powerful, like we have the energy that creates worlds and universes inside of us. We are of this creation, this God, this thing. We're not separate from it. It's either all God or it's none of it's God. There's no like, oh, well, God's over here. It's in this box, Well, it just can't be that way. It has to be all of it or none of it. And it was just like, you just brought up, that we're powerful, we're this, we're that. And it's just like, I just remember that moment where she took my hands and put them out. And it was just like, oh, wow. Like, and there's even science behind that, there's a Superman pose that people do and stuff. It was just interesting that you brought that up, because I think we can tap into that, this, let me close my eyes. Let me really embody this power within us. And Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, that actually ties into the gift I'd like to give your audience, which is the quantum energy cosmic healing meditation.
Yeah, I actually saw a note that you put in here. So tell me more about that.
Well, just it was something my helpers gave me. They guided me through it on a journey back in 2019, and it's long story short. You basically kind of leave your body, you go out into the cosmos, you see the entirety of the cosmos, and then you become aware of your body and notice that there are four cosmic energy centers, three in your body and one above. And then you flow energy, that cosmic energy, down through those centers one at a time, filling them up, overflowing to the next, filling them upward. And then the next thing you bring your attention to is there's a light grid, there's a mesh, like a bodysuit, all over your form. And as you become aware of it, you notice that it might be ripped or torn or bulging or dented. And you allow that energy to overflow into that light grid and smooth it out and heal it and repair it. And then from there, the energy overflows into sort of smaller chakra centers all over your body, and then down into the tissue, the cells, the DNA, the atomic particles, all the way down to the quantum field, and then back out. It's a very, very powerful experience. There's a lot of interesting healing and stuff going on there. And as I said, they just gave it to me. They guided me through it.
Say it one more
And
time. What's the?
the cosmic energy quantum healing meditation.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
if you go to my, andrewwayfinder.com/cosmic, you can, sign up, get the recording, and then you're on my notification list for events and things like that.
Yeah,
I
perfect.
won't spam you. I'll just let you know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's a great
But
teaching understanding stuff.
it's a really powerful thing, and I do it with clients and I do it with small groups, and people always come back going, "Wow, that was amazing."
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Yeah, so we'll put the link in for there so people can go there and check that out and just get a taste for some of this healing stuff that
Yeah.
you're
Well,
offering.
and one thing I really want to also say is that the word healing and energy and spirit can be kind of have like somber, heavy overtones.
Hmm.
And the thing that my clients and students are always amazed at when they first connect with spirit helpers and teachers is one, how happy they are to see them. It's like we've been waiting. It's so great to see you. But the other one is the lightness and the sense of humor
Mm.
that they find us kind of amusing. They don't take our worries and concerns very seriously. And and I remember once, one example of that was a bunch of years ago. I met these two angels in a journey once, and it was really funny because all of a sudden there were these two angels there, and one of them was covered in crossed ammunition belts and had pistols and all sorts of firearms, and the other one was like an old-fashioned pirate, cutlasses and knives and swords and all that sort of stuff. And I'm looking at them wearing all this weaponry, and at the same time it strikes me as they're so imbued with power and radiant and light. It's sort of like, and I suddenly asked them, what do you need all the weapons for? And as soon as I ask the question, the weapons turn into plastic Halloween costume weaponry. And they start laughing and said, well, we thought it would reassure you.
That's so cool. Yeah, Andrew. So I didn't really get into it, but I had a near-death experience that I was in a coma, a lung infection, a lot of stuff going on, some stupid decisions I had made. But when I came out of that and I was in the hospital room by myself, I was tuned in and tapped into spirit. Um, I could communicate with them. They were in the room. I thought I was crazy for a little while. Well, I did thought I was crazy, but oh my gosh, it's so funny. I can't even describe it to people because I feel like it's just weird, but they were laughing. They were like, there was such an amusement behind everything. Like everything that was going on, I was like, I could like see something changing materially, and I could see how people react to it. You know, I can like, I had a sense of everything happening, but there was such like a humor behind everything. I could almost like hear the laughter of what they were doing and saying. It was just so cool. And I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think there's this, don't take yourself too serious, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think one of the ways of looking at it or framing it is that when you really, really get that death doesn't exist,
Yeah. Yes.
an awful lot of fear and silliness and worry just, goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
Um,
shown that we live thousands of lives in different ways. I was told I like 9 different planets. Like Earth is one of the only places we go where we really don't remember who we were. I was in this school of in between lives where we get to choose the experience we want to have and go into that
mhm.
life to give us that experience. Really powerful stuff. I mean, when you embody that you're not the body, you're not this lifetime. This is just an experience that you can have, changes your life,
Yeah.
really.
Well, and I think, I mean, that's what my meditation teacher was showing me that time is like the plastic pitcher was the body.
Mm,
And then she's holding up, the tube of lemonade frozen concentrates. Like, this is the essence.
mm,
It just drops in for a while,
yeah.
but this is not you.
Yeah, I'm
And
doing
when
stuff right now.
it's
You
like,
can leave your body. Yeah, I've been doing out of your body practices, before you go to sleep at night. So there's a whole world of
yeah,
experiences
yeah,
waiting for everyone.
yeah. No, I mean, one of my sort of aphorisms about shamanism, it's the most fun you could have with your clothes on.
Yes. Yeah, and I feel like people are going to be curious about this and wanting to know more and dive into you deeper. Excited to maybe have you on again to dive more into some of
Yeah,
these
I would.
topics. I feel like we laid out a lot of different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, this has been a great conversation, and I think your journey is fascinating, and what you're doing with your podcast is amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and my main goal is, I want to show young people, by maybe reaching some of these parents and stuff that are on this spiritual journey, but eventually embody the family power of, manifesting and healing and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Well,
very
we
cool.
certainly, this tradition, this way of being in the world is certainly much, much older than the pattern we think of as normal, which
Mm.
is,
Oh, I
maybe
love that.
which is maybe 150 to 200 years old.
That's so profound. Wow. Yeah, I never really thought about that. This is way shorter than the awakening that we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, just to kind of respect time, Andrew, I do want to just do a lightning round real quick of maybe a book, tool, software, something that has impacted you in your life that somebody can check out today. Do you have something? I know you had showed a book earlier.
Um, well, I mean, there's the book I wrote, Free
Yes.
Your Soul, um, which is just the description of, it's a parable of this person who's feeling a little bit lost in life, and they meet this shaman, Balthazar Abraxas, who takes them through this destiny retrieval. And it's actually the experience I had back in the summer of 2008 when I went on my own destiny retrieval, and I unpacked this crusader lifetime that was still impacting my life 900 years later. And what I learned in doing it. I've been told it's a really good book.
All right.
I
All
mean,
right.
there
So
was
that's
Laura Ramirez, who wrote Keepers of the Children, said a beautiful story for self-growth and transformation, a parable, inspiration story, and self-help. But I'd say in terms of, oh God, I'm a big old collector of tools and ideas and things. It's so hard to pick just one, which is why I have a weekly newsletter where I
Right.
just drop, where I drop in things that I'm thinking about, tools that I'm using, and it's also got three summaries of current business and or business personal development books from Read It For Me, which is a really, really good book summary service.
I love it. Yeah. And if someone checks out your quantum meditation, um, it seems like they can get access to that more information that you have to offer and your book. And
Yeah, yeah, it'll, the meditation, I think, will, I mean, I think the heart of all this is that it's not me. I'm just the hose pipe bringing water to people. It's the water. It's all about the water. And the water's what's coming from spirit.
Spirit gave me an interesting outlook on it when I was asking this. This story came to me, and I can't remember where I read it. It might have been Edgar Tolle. But I know now when I ask a question, I trust that Spirit's going to give me the answer. It'll show up in different ways. But the answer when I ask, like, I don't understand the concept of, you know, God in the sense of an experience through different people. Like, how can they be experiencing different things if it's all the same? And the story was that, we're all in a mansion, a giant mansion, and everyone's in their own room. And one room has, pizza smell, and there's another room is like kind of mildewy, and another one's like full of sunlight, and it's just like a different airy feeling. And each person's in their own room, and they feel like they're in their own experience, and it's their own air, and it's their air. But the truth is the air is in every room, and it's all the same air. There's no like difference. It's just a different awareness, or different things that are injected in it. But we're all breathing the same air, and it's so anyways, yeah, very
Yeah.
cool.
Well, actually, I've given myself a few moments to think, and actually, what's popping in is two things. Just pay attention. Don't live your life on autopilot. Pay attention to what's going on, to what you're feeling, to what's happening around you, to what your reactions are. Don't be caught up in your reactions, but notice what they are. And I think the second really big important thing is learn to ask for help.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it's really, really immediate, you know, learning to ask for quite literal help, of the people around you, but also learning to ask for help from something bigger, because as you were saying earlier, they're all around, they want to help, but they can't help unless they're asked.
Yeah. Yeah. The the law of free will, right?
Yeah, but once I, I've I one of my favorite, I reworked one of those old jokes. How many shamans does it take to change a light bulb?
All right.
Only one, but the bulb really has to want to change. It has to ask for help and be willing to receive what's offered.
Mm, yeah, that's all true. Yeah. Um, yeah, very powerful. And just to point out too, if there's any women in the executive world, or seeking some type of help, that if that listen to that part of this, you also offer, a toxic workplace score quiz, and some other tools. So I just want to encourage everybody to go check out your website, get connected with Andrew, and plug into your life, your workplace, your relationships, and ask for help. And one of these people that can help you is right here. So very cool, Andrew. I would love to keep going. I just want to thank you for being on here, and hoping we can dive into some deeper topics at some point.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, guys. So plug into your life. In the meantime, Andrew, thanks again, and have a good night, guys.
Bye, Dylan. Bye, everyone.